friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I am so jazzed to talk to you about a book that I recently finished. It's called Clap When You Land. Perhaps like me, you've seen a bunch of people on Instagram post about this, and maybe you've seen it all over social media the way I have, but I finally got a chance to read it and I'm so excited to talk about it. If I haven't mentioned already, it's by the author Elizabeth Acevedo, and let's just go ahead and jump in. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the premise of the story. Essentially, there are two main protagonists in the story. They are both teenage girls. One of the girls is named Camino, and she lives in the Dominican Republic, and the other main protagonist is a teenage girl named Yahara, and she lives in New York City. And essentially, the main conflict is surrounded on their father's death. Their father dies in a plane crash, but unbeknownst to the two of them, their father was living a double life. He essentially had a family in the Dominican Republic, which was Camino's family, and he would go to visit Camino in the summer months. That's the only time he would see his daughter face to face in the Dominican Republic. And then he had his other life in New York City, and he was there from basically September to May, and that is where he has his wife and daughter, Yahara. The way the story is narrated is basically you have two parallel lives happening where we bounce as readers back and forth between the reaction and the handling and the mourning in New York City, and then also the reaction and the handling and the mourning of what's going on in the Dominican Republic. And their lives are forever altered unbeknownst to them. And although their lives seem parallel to us as readers, eventually it intersects, and the two girls discover that they share one very fatal and commonality, and that is that they have the same father. And they have to come to terms and grapple with the reality that their father led two different lives. It is an incredibly interesting story. I thought it was so well told. I appreciated that there are so many strong female characters, and it's not focused on romance. One huge flaw and problem that I have with young adult literature is so often you have a strong female character, but then there is like some male counterpart or some love story that detracts from the beauty and independence of the development of those female characters, and it drives me insane. But this book does not do that. It grounds itself in women, and it grounds itself in women role models, in strong female protagonists, and I absolutely loved it. This book, though, did pose a challenge for me, and that is the fact that it is written in prose. And if you're not 100% familiar with what that means, it's basically like reading poetry. I didn't know that about this text. To be honest, I don't know a lot about this author. I quickly learned from getting the cover of the book that this is not her first novel. I'm pretty sure it's her third novel. I now want to go back and read the other two because I love this so much. But her sort of huge craft is poetry slam, which is such an art form, and poetry itself is an art form. I will admit I'm not the biggest lover of poetry, so when I first got this book and realized it was in prose, I was kind of like, oh, all right, I'm here, I'm doing it. And I won't lie, it took me probably 10 or 15 pages to get into the rhythm of it because I am reading a poem. It's not as tricky to read as probably like traditional poems that you're used to reading in school or ones that you were exposed to during poetry units in English class, but it definitely has a groove to it that's different from picking up just a regular plain written novel that you might pick up in any other format. It was really powerful and I really enjoyed it, but I did have to sort of build up my stylistic reading of it because it wasn't as straightforward as reading like paragraphs and descriptions and the way you typically would approach a novel. But in the end, I came to really appreciate it, and I thought it was really interesting, and the way I engaged with the text was maybe even more so than I normally would. I was really into this. I found myself, no joke, at night being like, why don't you do some reading before you go to bed? And I would blink and I would read like 75 pages of this book. It was really powerful and really captivating. For me, on top of the strong characters and the way they're developed and the general story, I appreciated the thematic pieces of the story. You know, I really appreciated this idea of resilience and how people respond to difficulty in their lives and what they do to persevere and overcome that. It's really powerful and it's really prevalent in this story. And the way it's brought to the reader's light, I think, is something that a lot of people can connect to and it resonates with. And it just was a really, really powerful story. If my whole explanation of this being written in prose is a little overwhelming, I will link for you up here in the cards and in the description box a very short reading of the first few pages by the author, which gives you sort of a feel of the way it's pacing. And I feel like listening to that before you start reading it might help you kind of get into the rhythm if you don't feel like you're very strong in poetry or you're not like a lover of reading poetry. Again, I assure you this is nothing like the archaic genre you might truncate poetry to be. It is a very modern and powerful version of poetry, and I don't think that should deter you from reading this story. The last thing I just want to talk about briefly is the inspiration. I personally am someone who really likes to read the author's like note or commentary or acknowledgments, whatever you want to call it, at the end of a story. I don't know why I like it so much, but I just do. And in this book, there's actually an explanation from her about what inspired this novel. And I feel like you don't always know entirely what inspired an author, and I like knowing. And so the thing that she talks about is a real life plane crash that happened in New York City. Apparently November 13th of 2001, so just about 2 months after September 11th, there was a non-terrorist related plane crash. An American Airlines flight crashed in Queens, New York. It was a flight that was headed to the Dominican Republic, and there were no survivors. So all the people that were on that flight died, and the passengers were mostly comprised of people who lived in the Dominican Republic neighborhood, the community of New York City. It was a real trauma, and Elizabeth, she was 13 when it happened, and as someone who has roots in the Dominican Republic, it really, really shook her to her core, along with the community who experienced the tragedy. And I didn't know anything about that plane crash. Apparently, and I didn't know this plane crash is the second deadliest plane crash in America, second to the September 11th plane attacks. So very interesting inspiration for the story. And the other thing she says inspired the story, I actually want to directly read from the novel because I think it just perfectly captures why this story is so important. She says, most families are messy. Most parents will fail to live up to the hero worship of their children. In Clap When You Land, I wanted to write a story that considered who matters and deserves attention in the media, as well as a more intimate portrayal of what it means to discover secrets, to discover family, to discover the depths of your own character in the face of great loss and gain. Like I've mentioned probably a few times at this point, I highly recommend this book. I don't care what's on your to be read list, move this to the top, get it from your library, go and make a purchase. It is just absolutely phenomenal and so powerful, and I very much appreciated it. I cannot wait to snag her other 2 books from the interlibrary loan that I love to use so much. I'm pretty sure, I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure they're also written in prose, which I'll be interested to see how I feel reading those compared to reading this one. But 10 out of 10, definitely recommend. If you have read this book or any of her other books, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. As always, I am on the hunt for more books to read, so if you have any recommendations, let me know down below. I very much appreciate you guys tuning in for this, and I'll talk to you in my next video.